Hello and welcome to episode 109 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Joining me on today's episode is an absolutely incredible actor and an amazing person. I'm joined by Richard Brake. This guy is outstanding. I think I first remember seeing him in Batman Begins, but since then I've seen him work with the amazing Rob Zombie in stuff like Halloween 2, Free from Hell, 31. He's in films like Mandy, and obviously within TV work, you'll always know the guy from Game of Thrones. He's an absolute legend, and I can't wait for you to hear the interview. He's so good, and I love it from start to finish. But in true typical Mark and Me fashion, and you do know the score by now, I like to touch base and talk about the last episode. I was joined by the artist Andy Fairhurst, and this was the fourth part of my Voice Behind the Artist specials. I didn't expect these to do so well, and it's been amazing, and I love offering my platform for these guys to get heard and promote their work, and to see the response on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram to Andy's work is absolutely amazing. And I'm pleased to say that in a couple of episodes time I'm going to be joined by a fifth artist to continue these specials, because honestly the response has been absolutely amazing. But let's get back into today's episode. As I said at the start, I'm joined by Richard Brake, one of the best British actors out there, a lovely guy, and honestly the interview's absolutely awesome from start to finish. So I think we should get straight to it now. So here's me and Richard talking all things film. So Richard, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
What I want to do for the listener that's tuning in right now is take it right back to the very start. And when you were growing up, I want to know what was your kind of favourite films that made you fall in love with film?
Good question. One I haven't been asked. I thought I've been asked most questions. Well, I tell you what popped into mind right away was James Bond. I was a huge when I was, I think one of the things that what I fell in love was I fell in love with film, but I fell in love with characters. Like I think I'm not surprised that I ended up being an actor, because when I look back, when I was a kid, I always pretended to be somebody else. But I know everybody does that, right? Every kid goes off and pretends to be Batman, or I was James Bond a lot. Or I would, whoever I would be, I'd be the $6 million man for a while. But instead of, like, most people go out in the garden and pretend to play Batman, and then they come in and they're, little Bobby again while they're eating their dinner. But I would be Batman or James Bond or Lee Majors, whoever I'd be, $6 million man. I'd be them all the time. I was eating dinner, while I was going to bed, when I woke up. Like, in my mind, I was constantly pretending to be the other people, like constantly being other people. I think that the one that really always kept coming back was James Bond. I love James Bond films. My dad turned me onto them when I was like, I think the first one I saw wasn't a Sean Connery one, I wish, but it was Roger Moore when he did Live and Let Die. I think that was 72, and I was about 6 or 7. And my dad took me to see that. I mean, I was pretty young to be seeing it, but so that would be, I can remember that. So when I'm very young, that, and then after that, of course, I started just getting into all kinds of films. I got older. I just love filmmaking, but I love characters in films, and I love acting. And that's what really turns me on to.
So when you're this young and you're watching stuff like James Bond and stuff, obviously at that point you're not really thinking to yourself, "Oh, I hope I can become an actor," because you just, at that age you don't know what you want to do. No one does.
No, I wanted to be a spy, and some days, and then I wanted to be a superhero. So yeah, I want, and it's funny, I want to be like whatever doctor, whatever it would be like. And one time, I actually many years ago, I took a little respite from acting for a few years, like this is going back like 20, 25 years ago. And I was doing furniture. So, and I owned a bunch of furniture stores, and I was, selling furniture, and I was helping people design their houses. Now, I literally lived in an apartment in LA at the time that had a bed, and that's about it, right? And the sofa. While I was going to people's houses in Beverly Hills saying, "You should do this, you should do that, you should," like pretending like I knew everything in the world about how to design a house. And I mean, it was brilliant. Like, I was selling loads of it. And they would say to me, "You must have the most amazing home." I go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." I was thinking I had like literally a bed and a couch, and I was putting all my money in this business, and but I realized after a couple of years of doing it that what I enjoyed pretending to be this character of the.
Yeah.
After about a year or two of it, I dreaded it. Like I hated it. I ended up getting out of that business very quickly and going straight back into acting, and it's been brilliant ever since. But what I wanted to be was someone pretending to be something else, which is exactly what an actor gets to do. So I love being lots of different things. So as a kid, I just wanted to be all these things, but I only want to be them for about 6 weeks. That's
Yeah.
perfect. 2 months, perfect. Then I'm done. I'll be a brain surgeon for 2 months.
Amazing. And can you remember kind of when it became a reality in those first auditions that you were going to, when you started to get a call back and then invited, and you were like, oh, this is awesome. This is actually happening.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I remember my first jobs coming out when I got to drama school. But yeah, it's such hard graft when you're young. Yeah, some guys are so lucky, and young women are lucky. They'll come out of drama school and they'll just make it onto a TV series, or they'll be doing the West End play right away, and great for them. But I think one of the things, and I think I'm a testament to, as is my very close friend Eddie Marsden, because we both went to the same drama school and we've stayed friends ever since. But those first 10 years out of school were tough. I mean, we did, but the one thing we kept doing was anything we could get our hands on. So we would do, both of us, we've seen each other in so many, or did see each other in so many plays, and, the Hen and Chickens in Islington with 8 other people watching, and it was just like, we would do everything. You make no money, you have to graft to make your cash somewhere else, and just kept trying to stay in and get better at our profession and get better as an actor. So for me, a lot of it, those first 10 years or so, were spent a lot of time just doing things that hardly anyone ever saw. I think one of the first big things I did was a movie called Death Machine. And I remember, which, was still a low budget British horror film shot in 94, I think, but had Brad Dourif, great actor. And working with him, and I had a lovely part, and it was a really interesting director, Stephen Norrington. And doing that, and even going to the second audition, and auditioning with Stephen and thinking, I got this. I mean, that was a real thrill. It's like, oh, I can do this. And working with Brad Dourif and thinking, I'm able to hold my own here. I was 27 or 8, I think.
Yeah.
Then I thought, I think I can do this. And obviously it has its ups and downs, but that's, it's been a fun ride. But yeah.
One of the first times I saw you was on Screen when I went to see Batman Begins.
Yeah.
I'm sure you talk a lot about this in your career, but getting to work with Christopher Nolan is something that just must blow your mind, because I think right now he's probably one of the best filmmakers on the whole, really. And to be there at the start of this Batman trilogy, and now he's doing stuff like Tenet. What was it like working for such an absolute genius?
Well, what's so kind of fun about having worked on one of his first big films, right? Because he'd done Memento and Insomnia prior to that, and then his own, film following that he did as a young man. But is that he wasn't the man you think, Chris went on. So you look back and go, yeah, oh yeah, I knew but at the time you could tell that he had incredible level of confidence in his ability. And what I think always struck me, and what I'll never forget, is I know my first day was shooting a courtroom scene where, I had this little speech and Christian Bale's there, and this, big set. And this film has been running for, I think I've been shooting for about a month or two prior to that, maybe a month. And watching him, how calm he was, there he is. This is a film for like 300 million pounds, whatever they were, the budget was. He just looked incredibly assured, incredibly calm. He knew exactly what he wanted. And I thought, yeah, this guy's got something. It's amazing. I mean, he was young. He was probably, I mean, he's, was in his early 30s at that time. And yet he looked like a guy, who'd made 100 films. I mean, he's just incredibly assured. So it's no surprise, and it was great too. You knew that was a special film.
Yeah.
I'd been a huge Batman fan as a kid, like I said, and so it was just a thrill and an honor to play Joe Chill, the man who kind of made Batman, right? But what was very cool was was how you could feel it was going to a much different place with superhero films, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed, because to me they were all a bit too cartoony. You know, I was just a bit, you know, they look like people in rubber suits, and I was never a big fan of
No.
them. You know, I didn't mind Tim Burton's. I mean, they were as good as you could do in that day and age. But to me, it was like this. You could just feel it was real. And then
Yeah.
Christian Bale, you could see he was like, yeah, he barely would speak to me because obviously I killed his parents. So he was a character most of the time. He's like, you know, he was an actor, like real serious, taking this role really seriously, and you knew something special was happening. So, I personally think that's rejuvenated too. That was the beginning of this whole renaissance of superhero films, whatever the official expression is for them, you know, because they became real, you know.
Yeah.
So great to be a part of that. It was just incredible. I'm incredibly lucky I got to be a part of that.
And one of the most underrated films, I believe, out there is Munich. I think Spielberg is known for stuff like obviously E.T. and all the classics, but people don't give it
It's a
the
great film, isn't it?
oh,
Yeah,
like one of
yeah,
his
it's a
best.
great film.
Whenever,
Yeah,
you know, you're in the pub and you're having a pint, and was like, "What's your favorite Spielberg films?" And every single time, it's, you know, "Oh, I love this, I love that, Jurassic Park, and all this." But people
yeah.
don't give enough credit to the look, and you wouldn't think it's a film by Spielberg. Now, to go and know that you've been involved in that as well, my God, that must have just been surely one of your career highlights, just to be involved in such a beautiful
Oh
film.
yeah. No, we get to say, you know, I think that summer it was a fun summer. I worked with Brian De Palma
Yeah.
at the beginning of the summer, and then Steven Spielberg at the end of the summer. So I was like, you know, I was like, you know, especially someone my age, it was like a, you know, dream come true. These two are icons. But obviously, just being on set with Steven Spielberg, it was a trip. You know, just sitting there, you're talking to him. You know, because I'm from Wales, like I said, but originally I grew up in a place called North Carolina, and he had filmed uh, Color Purple, right? Is it Color Purple? Yeah. There, and he was talking. I'm sitting there talking to Steven Spielberg about North Carolina, and I'm thinking, this is bizarre. It's Steven Spielberg, and talk about a guy who now he is assured. Watching him on sets, it's a phenomenal experience because he, you know, he obviously does have not 100 films behind it, but unlike Christopher Nolan, he's got vast experience by the time he'd done Munich even. And the way his mind works is unlike any director I've ever seen. I mean, because with that scene that I'm in is pretty much one shot, you know, it's like so he had it all in his mind. He was incredibly calm. It was just watching in between takes, he would just sit and listen to things and chat with people. And then it was, and you just, the complexity of that particular setup and that shot, you know, it was just like another day to him. He just knew it all. It was incredible to watch him. He's like on another plane. His brain works filmmaking wise, unlike anyone's I've ever seen. But I was terrified. I mean, quick funny story. I don't want to use up all the time on this, but I mean, I would obviously it was like, here's Spielberg. I'm shitting myself a bit, and I think I have one or two lines at the end of this long take that goes past. You know, there's Kieran Hines and I forget, you know, there's loads of these actors, and they're all in the shot, and it kind of travels around, and then it kind of ends on me at one point, and I have to say something, and then it does its 5-minute travel, and the camera lands on me, and I kind of do my line, and Spielberg comes up to me, and he's like, "Oh, that's all right, but maybe a little less drunk, a little less drunk." I'm thinking, "Oh my God, I've screwed up." So I'm like, at that point, I felt like the ground had opened up. I'm like, so okay, do it again. Okay, it was set up. It was like 10 minutes to set it up. I honestly, and I thought, I've forgotten how to act. I felt like a postman who'd won a contest to be in a Steven Spielberg film. I was suddenly like, I didn't know. At that point, I just had to go, please, if there's a higher power, just help me. Just let me do it well. And then I just let go. And the camera comes around, boom, it hit me. It was fine. He was happy. It was good. I was like, okay. But that moment before he shows action the second time, I could tell you, that was one of the most scary moments of my 30-odd years. Yeah.
And I see a lot of your fans on Instagram and social media, they have an obsession with Rob Zombie films. Like, people don't just either like a Rob Zombie film, you either hate him and don't think he should ever remake any films, or they absolutely love everything he touches. Now, you've obviously worked with him a number of times, and you must be a huge fan because he seems to keep inviting you back and getting involved in films. And what's it like to work with someone that is still kind of making the name for himself, even though he's got some big releases and even worked with stuff like John Carpenter's material? He's still kind of grafting away and trying to establish himself at this time, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of mainstream,
Yeah,
definitely. Um, I mean, I love it. His fans are and they're incredible. I get to meet a lot of them when I'm out doing comic
yeah,
horror cons in particular. I've met and people on the street. You know, I mean, he really has an incredible fan base of people that I gotta say, I've grown really to really dig. But I mean, I honestly would say, I've worked with Spielberg, I've worked with all these great directors, but my absolute favorite director to work with is Rob Zombie. People are like, what? And absolutely. He is an incredibly creative man.
yeah,
Just, I know to many to people sort of into the kind of normal stuff or more mainstream things. They may not know him or they don't know his work as much, but he's just like this font of creativity, just constantly spewing it out. But what I think I dig most of all about him is he's incredibly inspiring to people who work with him. Like gives you great freedom, but really just is in like an inspiration. And the vibe on his sets are unlike any sets that I've worked on. Even people who are there as runners or in their first job as a PA are all just like trying their best to do the very best they can to kind of help Rob make this film and feel very inspired. And that kind of feeling, that's why I keep going back. I mean,
yeah,
he gives me great roles. I love the roles that he gives me. They're incredibly fun, and all of those reasons, you would go back anyway. But that's not really what excites me as much as I go back if he gave me a couple lines because I just
yeah.
want to dig that vibe. He is he's my. When people say who's your favorite director to work with, they're all expecting I'll say one of these great names, and they're all been brilliant. I've loved. Obviously, they're incredible to work with for different reasons. I did Anthony Minghella, he's amazing man, but Zombie, like Rob's just, you know, he's just a complete joy to work
Yeah.
with.
And he writes great music as well. And seeing his live
Yeah.
show, I went to Download last year, and he just blew everyone else out the
Oh,
water.
you did. So you know his stuff. You're in the music. Yeah, because his shows are amazing. I wanted to go to down. I wish I had gone. I should have. I forget why I didn't have a car then. Getting there
Yeah,
was kind of because Rob texted me. He's like, "Oh, I'm doing download tomorrow night. If you want to, come up." I was like, and I couldn't. To get there was like I had to like somehow get to flight in some place, and then I was like, I'm just not going to be able to do it. I
no,
don't think, man. Not in 20. But now I have a car, I'd have driven up because I would. These live concerts are
it's
just a
unbelievable.
blast. Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah,
incredible. It's not even if you
yeah,
don't like his music, you can just go there and enjoy the
yeah,
show. It's just like a theater experience. It's amazing.
yeah. And you know what's so great about him? But I have to say this, again, it's inspiring. I think for people is that he a lot of people, he was very successful, I guess, in the late 90s. Had, I
Yeah,
mean, we all know those hits. And so many people just kind of fade out. A lot of musicians or artists can fade out as they get older. And I think Robbie's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. He still brings huge crowds in the States. He sells out
yeah,
every summer, these massive places. And I think that's a testament to his professionalism, because he, on the surface you'd think, he's crazy rock star, he's probably snorting and drinking, and
yeah,
he's so like not he's vegan, he's very professional, his sets are professional, his work ethic is professional, and ultimately I use him as an example to my own kids who are both budding young
yeah.
artists, and I'm like, that's the way to behave, and that way you can be 50, he's about my age, 54, 55, and be you know, still creating great work and even better work every time,
Yeah,
comes out.
I agree. Every time I
And
see, yeah,
fill stadiums that,
yeah,
not be playing a bar, you used to play stadiums. Now you're lucky to fill a bar, that's
yeah.
to me, just a wonderful example of how to behave in this biz.
And some of the listeners will absolutely crucify me if I don't talk about Game of Thrones. My Facebook and Twitter for the last few years was just Game of Thrones, and I had to end up watching
Mm.
it at night because I didn't want people to spoil it the next day. I got to the point where people were just going out there and ruining it by posting pictures and stuff. But to play the Night King and be involved in probably the biggest TV we've had in 20 years, I'd say.
Yeah,
Since stuff like
definitely.
Sopranos and Breaking Bad, it's the show that everyone on, would go to work the next day and be like, all they'd say is, did you watch it last night? It didn't matter what it was. You knew that if they just
Yeah.
said to you, did you watch it? They were talking about Game of Thrones, and the scale and the size of everything involved with that. I mean, you must have been going on to set, and the makeup alone and the production and the budget and just the scale. It must have been, well, you're probably never going to work on anything like that again.
Yeah, no, I mean, and especially now that even a lot of big budget films don't feel like that. I mean, there was so much money in that film,
Yeah.
in that show. I mean, every episode we did Hard Home, that episode, where I raised the dead at the end and
Yeah.
everything, and that I think had 3 weeks worth of rehearsals prior. That scene, that 20-minute segment. Had something like 3 weeks of rehearsal prior to shooting, and then shot for a couple of weeks at least. Um, that's unheard of in television, and the budget on that alone was crazy. Yeah, I'm just incredibly grateful I got to be a part of the show. It's because I think for the reasons you said, I mean, I would say not even the last 20 years. I mean, definitely Sopranos is very important, and Breaking Bad is one of my favorites. But what I think it did more than any show's ever done is it created this kind of it was almost like a catharsis for so many people, like theater is, like back in Greek, and supposedly in the old days, the Greeks made their citizens go to the theater because they knew how important it was. They had experienced the cathartic experience of
Yeah.
seeing like these major human emotions and events like incest, death, all these huge things were then put into Game of Thrones. And people had that same experience with that show. They would often watch it together. Some people come up to me and say, "Oh, my family got together every Sunday night, or we went to parties every Saturday, Monday night if they're over here."
Yeah.
It's this, and the communal experience of that, or they went to work the next day, like you said. I think it was nothing's been like that yet up to this point. That was the first television thing that really created that feeling. So it was wonderful to be a part of that. Really, I'm very, very lucky and very honored.
And what was the actual time really? Because people say it, but how long did it actually take to be in makeup and get all made up?
6 hours.
Fucking hell! Jesus.
Yeah, and 2 hours to take it off.
Oh
Yeah, it was.
man.
Yeah, so I would sleep like 3 hours a night. I
Yeah.
could. I had to. I had fake teeth. Couldn't really eat a lot. Had big fingernails that were massive, so I couldn't really do anything. And if I had to go to the loo, they would have to literally shut the production down. So I would have to moderate my eating because I didn't want to have to take a crap in the middle of the day and have the entire
Yeah.
500 extras waiting for me to come out of the porta potty. So I was
Yeah.
it was to me, the experience as much as anything was one of a kind of, it was like a physical ordeal.
Yeah.
Every night I'd sleep 3 hours a night. My eating, everything was completely like I had to almost prepare myself every time I was going to play him to just be like physically in the right space and do it. But it was, again, it was worth it. But the worst part was the contact lenses, the huge. You can't put anything bigger in the human eye, and it was just agony.
Well, you didn't show it on screen. I couldn't see that you were suffering.
Yeah,
That's a
you
good
could
thing.
see underneath. I was just crying. On the outside, I looked like I would kick your ass.
And one of the best films I've seen in probably the last 3 years, which again was a Marmite film. People said they loved it. People said they hated it. But I loved Mandy. I thought it was an absolutely awesome film. I think Nicolas Cage is hit and miss. Sometimes you watch a Nicolas Cage film and you cringe and think, oh, he's obviously got a bill to pay this week. But to watch him in Mandy, I was like, this is the Nicolas Cage that I used to love. This is the Nicolas Cage I want all the time. And what was it like to work on that movie and again see the success, because it shouldn't do as well as it did, and it became this kind of cult classic overnight, even though it's so recent.
I mean, literally overnight, right? That's exactly what I felt. It was a great experience. But again, it was Panos Cosmatos. I'm going to pronounce his last name well, but Panos, who who is such a visionary director, and you kind of knew when you were. I only on that for one night. It was a weird experience. I auditioned for that. It was I'd been asked to read for a couple of roles. The Chemist And then this other one, which is kind of interesting. It was the part that Ned Dennehy plays, which is the
Yeah.
sidekick to Patty. And I read it. I was like, I couldn't work anything out with that character. But of course, he would make a lot more money, whoever played that part, because you were in the film quite a bit. Whereas the chemist was a
Yeah.
part I knew right away. Like I thought this part, I went in the audition, whipped my shirt off, have all tattoos on my back. So I just did this bizarre improv around the whole thing. I got a call like an hour later, I think, from my agent saying, "Oh, Panos wants you to be." I guess Panos is a Rob Zombie fan, so he also seen me
Yeah.
in that as well. And I just thought it was great. Go do that. So it was amazing to go there and just did this, one night. But you could see with Panos then even, and I'd spoken to him before as well, but that he's this big burly guy that laughs all the time. He's such a huge personality, but really like a mind that is in another realm. You
Yeah.
just knew this guy is going to make something really interesting. And of course, the result was, when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh my god, it's just mind blowing."
Incredible.
It makes you feel like you're on acid. I haven't done
Yeah.
any kind of psychedelic or any drugs in 30 years, and I felt right back to where I was, and it was just this
Crazy.
trip. Yeah. And Nicolas Cage, he was incredible that night. It was just the two of us, and he doesn't speak the whole time that I am in my scene. And mostly an actor like Nicolas Cage, you figure out they won't even sit there, they won't stand there. They'll just put in some kid, to be there while the camera's on you. And the entire time, not only did Nick Cage stay the whole time off camera for me, but he actually stayed completely focused and in character the whole time. I doing all this monologue talk
That's
at him.
awesome.
I mean, that's so I can't say bad. I mean, nobody can say a bad thing to me about Nick Cage, because that's total professionalism.
No, that's
Really
awesome.
pretty mind blowing. But that was fun. That's a fun film. Anyone who hasn't seen it, you definitely got to check
Oh,
it out.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
And at the moment, you're promoting your latest film, The Dare. For this role, obviously, you've got a lot more on screen time. I'm sure you weren't there just for one night. This is a big role
No.
for yourself. And, did it feel a challenge to kind of step it up a lot to be in this film, in the fact that you're pretty much the main character throughout?
And no, not really. I'd done a previous. No. I mean, I feel like I do. Rob's films.
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot, and also in yeah, I've done here and there. And then I did actually play the lead in a film called Perfect Skin, which is a small British indie. Which again, people should really check that film out. I put a little plug in for that, because you can pick it up on all the streaming
Now
services. But it's
available
called
on
Perfect Skin.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But that's a great little film too. It was a lot of fun. But with this one, I felt what really I got. I mean, what I loved about this was it was just going to mostly be me and this young lad, Mitchell Norman,
Yeah.
and we had this bizarre father-son relationship, if you could call it that. Was a warped father-son relationship, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it was exploring that was just going to, I thought, would be incredibly fun to do, and interesting, and pretty dark and pretty scary place, because I have called Three Boys, and just exploring this sort of weird dynamics with why this guy is behaving like that, and what's going on here, was fun to do. So I didn't feel daunted at all by it. I just was mostly just thrilled by the chance to explore kind of father-son warped dynamics and what was going on. I don't want to give much away, but there's a reason why my character is not particularly the best father in the world to poor Mitchell.
Yeah, I don't want to cut any spoilers.
But let's just say he isn't going to win Father of the Year.
No,
but, he's had some damage. So bless him.
And preparing for that,
my guy has issues.
Yeah, and preparing for that film, obviously with the script, and obviously it's really hard because I don't want to spoil it, because I want people to go and check this film out, and it's good to go into this film with not knowing anything. But how did you mentally prepare for this? How did you get yourself in that mindset when it is quite a warped kind of story?
I mean, I don't find it hard to go into that mindset anymore, which is so weird, isn't it? But I think at some point I just found that, I'm playing all these dark people in these very dark worlds. And, and I just find that I'm just not afraid anymore to really go there. And this one was tough because, it is tough when you have three kids. I have to, I had two boys at that time, and exploring kind of abuse, but it's I don't find it hard to go there. It can be pretty taxing by the time you're done. So by the time we're done with that whole shoot, it was pretty. I didn't want to go back there for any time soon. But and then of course, without giving it all away, there's a whole another story going on inside the film that
Yeah.
I didn't have my involvement with really because it's for reasons that make sense when you've seen it. But and that stuff, is just that's when it gets really twisted. And so for those guys, I mean, I've not done a film that's as twisted as that. I don't
No.
think. I mean, I've done some. That I can imagine is it's really tough. And for me, if it was just that and I was involved, I'm not a big fan of just that. What I love about this film is it takes that kind of, which I sort of like, those films like Hostel and stuff.
Yeah.
So you can explain to people that, those very kind of a lot of torture, a lot of things that are pretty unpleasant. If it was just that kind of stuff in this film, I would say, I probably wouldn't have done it. But what I love about this film is it's much more complex, much more about, issues we have as children, really. Things that happen to us in childhood, and it really explores kind of the characters a lot more. And I thought that was, and my character, of course, has a lot more to do with that. So that's what really, really made me want to do it.
A lot of fans of the Mark and Me podcast are usually quite a young crowd that are kind of wanting to study film or get into acting, or they're going to film school. And a question I ask everyone that comes on the show, even if they're an editor, cinematographer, producer, director, or actor, is what advice do you give to those people that are trying to make a name for themselves in a business which is so hard to kind of get recognized? When you look at the film industry right now, I know, forgetting lockdown and COVID and everything, but it's such a tough world to try and get into, to stand out above anyone else, with so many people studying acting or going to film school. But what advice, or what have you done that's kind of got you to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a good question. My son's the same because both of them. One's a musician, he's 18, and the other one is a filmmaker. He's 21 in university, and I often think about them, and it feels tough. It feels now, especially because it's easy to see what everyone else is doing. Back when I started out, you felt a bit isolated. You could see what your mates were up to, but you couldn't see everybody else on Instagram. Oh, he's done this, So I know, it feels harder for people who are a lot younger than me who are starting. I mean, honestly, my advice always remains pretty much the same, and that is, I think it's two things that really helped me the most. Um, and I think especially when I started, but first one, and no one everybody thinks I'm going to give some magic bullet, but I have to say the first one is to meditate, or try and find something like meditation, to really give you a much more, to just bring you to a stiller place. I mean, I've meditated for a long, long time, very, very regularly, and I do yoga. I do a lot, but I think you need that as an artist, and a lot of the artists that I really have a lot of respect for. I'm never surprised when I read an interview and they say I meditate. I'm a huge Nick Cave fan, and read something recently where he talks about how he does it. I think it's crucial for a lot of reasons, and I won't waste the whole podcast talking about it, but I would say definitely explore that if you can. I think it helps you in many more ways than you can imagine. The other one is, especially if you're starting out and you've been going for a few years or something, is always just keep trying to learn. I think one of the things I noticed about when I left drama school is that a lot of people sort of left drama school and thought, okay, now I'm an actor, and
Yeah.
and give me a job. And they just went and they went to auditions, and some of them, the better looking ones, or the ones that had the right kind of voice, and they might have worked for a bit and then it stopped. And the few of us that are still in the business, 30 years later, are ones who, when they came out, a lot of us didn't get jobs necessarily at the beginning either, but we just kept, learning. We kept going. We were talking earlier before that we started the podcast, but I'm good friends with Eddie Marsden, or maybe I mentioned earlier, but two of us were doing plays all the time, in little pubs, and just constantly trying to learn. I would take classes, he would too. We took classes with a particular teacher that we liked, a Russian man. Taught, this was after we'd done our degree and all. Kept doing it. Even in my 30s, I would sometimes do a class, or I would do something. Always trying to learn and get better. And I think it's a really, really important, never to feel like, oh, now I know it. It's
Yeah.
always just learn and do shit for free, and do student films or make films, or just keep. And I say to my boys, 21, just make stuff, man. Just make stuff. Just make it shit. Fuck it. Throw it away. Make stuff.
Yeah.
Make stuff. Make stuff.
Keep going.
Yeah. So I think those are the two things that really, really still help me. Still help me keep going.
I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, man. That was good.
I
Honestly, I really enjoyed it.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and Richard Brake. What a great guy. I love the amount of different roles he's been in, the range of characters he's played, and he's just awesome. He's such a great guy, and I think I find myself saying this most weeks on the podcast. I felt I could have talked to him for easily a couple more hours. Sometimes when you're limited, it's frustrating, but I felt we got a lot out the time we were given. So a massive thanks to Richard for coming on the show. And again, if you haven't at this point, check out his new film, The Dare. It's doing really well. I've been lucky enough to see a screener of it, and it's awesome. He's so good, and I can't wait to see where he's going to go next. In true typical Mark and Me fashion, I like to plug my social media. If you go onto markandme.com, on there's my Facebook, my Twitter and my Instagram. Please let me know what you think of the episodes. I've seen a lot of new people signing up recently. There's loads of competitions happening to win some amazing prizes, and you can also support me on my Patreon page. You can go on there's a link on Mark and Me and all my social medias to get on there and support the podcast from as little as £1 a month. For that, at the moment, you're getting about 6 or 7 episodes, an opportunity to win some absolutely incredible prizes. Honestly, some of these prizes are unreal and you can't buy them. I've had artist proof copies of most recent Matt Ferguson prints, Sam Gilby. It's been insane, and they're going to keep on coming. So if you get on there and support me, all the money goes back into the podcast. I don't make any money myself, and it means I can host the podcast on all these different platforms, travel the country, and do more and more interviews, which means more and more episodes for you guys out there. It's very busy as always. I hope you're all staying safe out there, and what I'll come back in a few days with a brand new episode for you all. So until then, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Come sail your ships around me and burn your bridges down. We make a little history, baby, every time you come around. Come loose your dogs upon me and let your hair hang down. You are a little mystery to me every time you call around. We talk about it all night long. We define our moral ground. But when I crawl into your arms, everything, it comes tumbling down. Come sail your ships around me and burn your bridges down. We make a little history, baby, every time you come around. Your face is falling sad now, for you know the time is nigh when I must remove your wings, and you must try to fly. Come sail your ships around me ocean.